Hey, before we jump in, I just want to say thank you. The response to the podcast so far has been incredible. I started this show to share the kind of conversations I've been having for years with other creatives and small business owners, and it's been great. It's been great seeing it resonate with you all. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, or share with a friend. It goes a really long way. All right, let's get into it.
I became a firefighter at 36
Oh my gosh.
with two really young children. And then at 38, I joined a rugby club and started playing rugby. And that's generally 5 years after people retire.
Yeah,
And
that is not a
yeah,
young person's game.
I feel like every year I'm like, what am I going to do to feel uncomfortable?
Hey everyone, welcome to The Infinite Errand, a podcast about the work we do before we win as we talk with creatives, artists, and small business owners about where they started, what nearly stopped them, and why they're still going. On the show today, how a woman raised inside the uncertainty of a working farm became the co-founder of a design brand built on craft, conviction, and endurance, and how years of risk, reinvention, and real pressure shaped her understanding of what it actually takes to keep a small business alive. If you grew up around a small business, especially one tied to the land, you learn pretty early that stability can be an illusion. One season looks promising, the next brings debt, stress, bad timing, and a whole new set of decisions. You learn that work and worry often live in the same house. My guest today is Alyssa Catalano, co-founder of Studebaker Metals. She grew up in South Jersey in a working-class farm family, surrounded by long hours, financial uncertainty, and the kind of labor that shapes the way that you see the world. Later, after working in fashion, marketing, and product development, she met Michael Studebaker, a metalsmith with deep craft instincts and a very different set of tools. Just weeks after meeting, they started building what would become Studebaker Metals. But this conversation is about more than how a business starts. It's about what happens after the early momentum. How do you build something lasting when the costs keep rising, the pressure keeps changing, and the things that once worked no longer work in the same way? How do you hold on to your values while still trying to survive? And what does it mean to keep going when your business looks successful from the outside, but still feels fragile from the inside? This is a conversation about risk, resilience, and the strange emotional math of running a small business for more than a decade. I'm Tyler Deeb, founder of Miscellaneous Goods Company, and this is Alyssa Catalano on The Infinite Errand. Okay, so first off, welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited about this. This is an expression of like doing what you're saying, which is like trying to create more organic reach for me and my friends, the brands I want to support, the people that have the most interesting stories, the people that do the best work. So this really is just like, all right, like I felt that same pressure that you did, which is like, how do you generate more noise without being annoying and without decreasing value, but adding value? And although there's a million podcasts, there's nothing I've found that's specifically around people who are kind of just grinding through entrepreneurship on a day-to-day basis still. So that's what this is about. This is about who those people are, like why they got into what they did, and what they're learning throughout the process of trying to run a business. But to even try to wrap our mind around that, I'm really interested kind of like what your early life was. Like, where did you grow up and what was that community like for you?
I was raised by a really special type of entrepreneur, which are a working class farm family.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up really rurally. And I think when I say that to people, they often are picturing something like really idyllic and sweet looking. And that was not the case at all. I grew up in South Jersey.
Did you have plumbing?
Yes. Okay. That would have been romantic if I did it.
I don't know.
Yeah, I grew up in
sawdust buckets before. It's not great.
Yeah, no, I think that would be romantic. That would be the story. But my house was like a 1986 new build prefab.
Yeah.
And it was very much like a family farming operation that
What were you guys farming?
We were farming what I call, for short, for people who maybe don't live in that world, like combine crops. So things that were harvested with machinery as opposed to hand-picked, which where I grew up, my cousins and my extended family had tons of like picking crops, the tomatoes, the cute stuff, but the main crops were grains, corn, wheat, barley. Amazing. Now my family does a lot more. We did a lot of soybeans, and now my family plays more with like greens, like collards and kale and things like that. I feel like my family was constantly chasing a new story. And for them, it was a new thing to take to market and something to sidestep how hard farming was getting.
Are you saying that your family was thinking about marketing while they were farming?
Not marketing per se, but they were desperately trying to reach a space in farming that was not organic farming, but like organic sales and distribution, because the government had taken over so much of it. There was so much control. And
they were trying to take back control of...
Right, and pricing. And so they were trying to find the crop that I think often
they didn't work with Monsanto ever, did they?
You had to.
God, then that
yeah, you don't.
I saw that documentary. When was that documentary?
Oh, it was at least 10 or 15 years ago, but I had a really emotional response to it for sure. But that's exactly what it was like. Like my family, you didn't really have a choice. It's really complicated.
And then you would take loans, right? Like they would give you money, and they would have crazy amount of debt, and they were just they were basically enslaved by it.
And that is the debt cycle, debt service cycle of a farmer is a really depressing reality that looks very different than the cute cow pasture you pass on the right interstate or whatever. So I was like 8 years old and working in a packing house and riding a four-wheeler to work. I would be sent out the door and not come home till it was dark and things like that. And, we hung out at the gas station when I was a teenager. I got a job at the gas station pumping gas so that I would be allowed to be out later at the like social spot. And I did grow up back to back with a rodeo. So.
Oh, that is pretty romantic.
Which people don't necessarily associate with New Jersey.
Right. No, not at all. Absolutely not. Wow, that's incredible. So like when you were young and your family was kind of working through this like passion for farming, this responsibility towards debt, these partnerships that were impossible to avoid. I mean, I'm assuming that was a lot of anxiety and stress for your parents.
That was their whole existence. Was what that felt like. Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of trauma was born out of that. And
your trauma or their trauma?
Their trauma, which, as we know, becomes mine.
Yeah.
But I do think that experience of living through uncertainty and ups and downs and feeling, oh man, we're going to Disney World and we're rich. And then, we're not talking at the dinner table, like at all.
Like the ups and downs of
the ups and
entrepreneurship.
Downs, have made that really comfortable for me. And, I have a business partner in Michael, and our relationship with risk and our relationship with the tumultuous nature of small business is really different. And I credit that experience of feeling that and also knowing that there's always an upswing is comforting to me. And I also learned a lot of the what to do and the what not to do. And I am grateful ultimately that I had a front row seat to.
And you feel like they handled that well as best you can, as a parent?
Not the best one can, but the best they could for sure.
Yes.
And my family
100%.
are,
that is
my
like
family
such
are zillionth generation farmers. Farming since they settled, in this country, and all Italian farmers in Italy. My
Italian
family history. So
I guess Catalano, yeah.
Yeah, and I know, and I am pretty like blue-eyed and pale, but I'm told that's a Northern Italian thing. But it's interesting because, now as an adult, I like see what they were born with and what their parents were born with. And it's just, it doesn't necessarily make mishandling of things okay, but it does make it make sense. And
you have to have
a
grace.
healing thing.
There's a there's a great, one of my favorite spiritual authors is C.S. Lewis, and he writes something about just how, basically, and this isn't like new for us to talk about now. It's not an uncommon theme, but like for some people, being kind and generous, he's talking about it, is like being kind and generous comes easy. And so for them to be kind and generous is not that great of a thing to applaud because it's part of their natural disposition. Whereas some people, because of their trauma or because of their childhood or because of where they were taught or because of their natural expression, they are not. And so for them to correct that behavior and make even a slight gesture of kindness is a greater, achievement than the person who did, wonderful things with their. And I think that's just kind of what I'm hearing here too, which is like, yeah, now they made some mistakes. They did things that you wouldn't do, but they're working from a tool bag that had less tools in it because of how they were brought up or because of the times or whatever. And just like having grace for that, I think is really awesome that you can do that.
Right. And I think that our generation, partially because of digital access, but just access in general and sort of a resurgence of notions around trauma and healing and therapy and all of those things and resources, it's really easy for us to sort of self-congratulate about breaking our cycles and things.
Yeah.
But my parents, what they lacked more than anything was resources. And I'm proud of myself for the work I've done around that. And I could easily have not explored that, but I also have a different kind of access. And in many ways, they were the source of providing that. So, families are complicated.
No, that's great. I think you're absolutely right. Was it on the farm that you started working with your hands? Because, you obviously, you built a business around working with your hands.
Yeah. And my very first job, and I always say the hardest job I ever had, I started when I was about 8 years old, which is definitive child labor, but I was getting up at 5 a.m. I was in the packing house till about 5 p.m.
Wait, for a second, just because you need to explain it to me too, but for the audience, what is the packing house?
Oh, a packing house. So that was like the facility where it wasn't my family's. It was actually my father's cousin because there wasn't much place for an 8-year-old on a machine crop farm. But a packing house is where they would pull all the picked crops, the tomatoes, the peppers, the cucumbers, and process them into packing them into boxes.
Gotcha.
And so it was like that conveyor belt system. And my job first was...
At 8 years old.
At 8 years old, my job from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. was to build waxed boxes, to build the boxes they went into, to keep them going. And so my hands up to my elbows, my clothes were all perpetually covered in a layer of cardboard wax.
Now, was this your way to contribute to like the family fund, or was this money that you were taking home for yourself?
This money I was taking home for myself, and It was very much an exercise for my parents of sort of early exposure to what it's like to not just work, but to farm, because I think that their greatest wish for all of us is that we would do anything else. And there's lots of indicators that that was their plan, but I think knowing what it was to work hard was important. And also, if I'm being honest, it was childcare. They sent me somewhere else. They were not there, you know? And someone was able to... You were
safe, you're supervised, you were making money.
Yeah, and I wasn't necessarily supervised or safe by OSHA standards.
Right.
But, or
by your parents' standards.
What is it? Or child services. But yes, for the purposes of my family, I was. And then eventually that evolved into being on the belt, which was often... They would pour the crops in, and then my job was to find the ones that were filled with bugs or rotten and pull them off before they went into the boxes. So it was glamorous work. But the day I turned 14, I rushed out to the Super Wawa to apply for a job pumping gas. And I always say the worst job or the hardest job I ever had was in the packing house, and the best job I ever had was pumping gas.
Really?
and I think there's no denying that one sort of rescued me from the other, and that one was just sort of inherently social, which I think is the sort of core of my
everyone that pulls
interest.
up, you're talking to them, you're doing them a service.
Well, and in New Jersey, it's all full service, so you can't pump your own gas.
Right.
And the other teenagers were coming in and getting their gas, and I was experiencing people on their way to the beach, and I was just seeing the world around me, where it had been so insular growing up in a rural place where there's no neighbors, there's no riding. I never even had a bicycle. I had a four-wheeler, and then when I was 12, I had a car. And at 14, I had a license, you know? And so now I know it was a unique way to grow up. But the pumping the gas was an escape. And then for me, the transition into craft was very much from like a constant pull towards creativity. I was always the youngest child. I was always like the sort of strange one, the rebel. And for me, that was expressed mostly in my personal style. And when I was young, I wanted to be a fashion designer, and I wanted to move to a big city, and just sort of a rejection of all the things. And so I kind of did all of that. And that is what led me to meeting Michael.
And where did y'all meet?
It's actually like a really fun thing, because we met on Tinder, but we met the day he downloaded Tinder, and I was his first match.
Yes. And what year was it?
It was the day Tinder was invented, I always say. Or it was like a year in, because I had been slogging around. He was not my first match. But must have been 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2013, and he downloaded Tinder. I was his first match.
That's amazing.
I had been working in e-commerce marketing and product development, and I had been a jewelry buyer and a vintage buyer, and I was a art director. I was a photo art director when we met. And so my lens of creativity, and I had studied creative writing in college, and I had done special effects makeup at a younger iteration. And so I had just been playing with creative expression and design, and then that ultimately led me to opportunities in marketing and styling and things like that. And then when I met him, he just had this raw craft, and he was waiting tables, and he didn't know what to do with it.
And did you feel like the stuff that you had been doing personally, or like whether you're studying and all that, did it feel like such a big contrast from this idea of actually getting in there and like making things?
You mean like specifically the way that I was executing, like in the jobs that I had, versus using my hands to make something?
Were you satisfied by the marketing and kind of like digital work that you were doing?
So satisfied.
Oh, really?
So my primary work at the time where I started Studebaker was, I had done buying and product design and stuff, and that was more of a slog. But when I met Michael, I was really feeling in the right place for me, or in the right type of work, which was I was concepting and leading photo and content and marketing campaigns, the visual piece, the photo and video, from concept through delivery, and being on set and traveling and, making selects, and all of that felt so satisfying, and it felt very much tapping into my strengths, which were coordinating and creating like a vibe for a group of people that are trying to make something bigger than themselves. And I think where it always fell short for me was, at the end of the day, we were always like selling a sort of soulless product. And that's not true of everything that I worked on, but I worked for mostly larger companies, and we were always sort of like targeting women, and the sort of impulse to buy another one, have the new thing. But I was, at the time when I met Michael, working for a company that was like very body positive and size inclusive, and there were values at least to
So you felt good about the mission.
So I felt good. But ultimately, I always say that when I met Michael, people always say, oh, like, how did you guys start this? Because we also started this business 2 weeks after we met. And that is not an exaggeration, which is its own story.
So you guys let's get back to it. So you guys meet on Tinder, you go out, you guys are super into each other, and you start, on the second date, you're starting to write up business plans?
Well, we were super connected. And I think it was a really special time because I had moved to Pittsburgh recently. And I wouldn't say that it was super passionate, which progresses in a funny way.
No, I understand.
When I met him, his mother had passed away from cancer about 4 weeks prior. And he had moved back to Pittsburgh to sort of see her off. And he had left a great job in Philadelphia. And I had also moved here a year prior for work from Philadelphia. We didn't know each other then, although we have lots of weird overlaps there. But I think that the time that we met, we both were just cracked so wide open. I was in a new city where I knew pretty much no one, and I was 26, and I had gone through like a major breakup and left a big city, and I had only lived in big cities since college, and he was in this like overwhelming state of grief, but he was also in like a wide open, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And to tie that back to what I was doing at the time was the reason we started a company or started working on what was then a project so quickly was because I had spent my entire 10-year career since then sitting in these boardrooms, mostly with executives and who were for these products targeting women that were mostly male executives, where we were all sort of sitting around and trying to find a new story to tell because, here's some new clothes, here's some new clothes, here's some new clothes. And it was at a time where social stuff and blogs were all popping up and bigger companies were really trying to tap into that emotional piece. Not that marketing hasn't always been emotional, but it was just really big. And we were just scouring for stories. And I remember walking into Michael's dad's basement where he was living, and he had made a couple of things out of metal, and he was showing me his tools, and they were 400 years old, and he had tools that were his grandfather's involved, and the workbench had been in the house since he was a little kid, and the materials all had like a specific way that they moved. And I just said to him, I was like, is this what you want to be doing? Because I've never, in all of the work I've done, had such an easy and romantic story that tells itself. Not to mention the history of metalwork in a city like Pittsburgh.
I'm following you. So
I was exploiting the shit out of this guy. Like I was like, oh,
you saw the potential here. Like so you. Yeah, just to summarize the thought,
easy.
like, so you're working in marketing, you're part of a team, you're constantly looking for stories. Like you find yourself, you see how important like storytelling is to like brand building, and you're kind of hitting your head against the wall constantly trying to come up with new content for all these different fashion like opportunities. And then Michael kind of shows you his kind of journey of like, working in metal, and you're like, oh my gosh, there is a story here, like that is just so organic. And that's kind of what drew you to the business side of it.
Yeah. I mean, he had grown up in a steel city, and his grandfather was a cobbler and a craftsman his whole life. And he had this thing he was doing that created inherent quality when I was literally going to work every day and trying to make low quality things feel
high quality.
And so, I was just like, hey, you've got something here. It was also a time where
How cool.
where like Japanese denim and leather goods and Americana in general was just booming. And there weren't many people working with metals, and that felt, but the stuff he was making sat so beautifully with that. And the working with the metal was such a high entry of skill set. And he trained on metalsmithing. He started in high school, and then he has a fine arts degree in metalsmithing, and that's just kind of a rare path to take to that. And then he went and worked in both architectural welding and bench jewelry, and then eventually in the Philly Art Museum as a mount maker. And so he just had such a wide knowledge set, and he frankly was waiting tables, and I worked a Monday through Friday, and I didn't like that my new boyfriend was always busy on Saturday night. So I said, hey, let's build a company and you can quit that and we can go out.
And Studebaker Metals, that's how it started.
Yeah, we met around Halloween, and we had our first pop-up shop at a coffee shop December 14th of the same year, and we launched our website in March.
And how'd that do? How did the pop-up do?
It was great. It was like we promoted it on our Instagram that we had created that was mostly our friends and family following, but it was organic reach on Instagram was a real thing. And so people came by and we made a little money, and we just kind of got to see what people gravitated towards on the table. And, like when we look back at those designs now, we like cower, but we were able to go back and launch a website by March. And by June of that year, we had leveraged some of my industry connections to get some big wholesale orders. And that was Michael's full-time job by June. So
amazing.
I kept my job for quite a while. I hired 2 people in production before I came on full-time because I just loved my job and I loved my team. And I was at a point in my life where building a business and keeping my job felt exciting.
I mean, a lot of people, of course, I'm sure they do for you too, is they want to kind of understand what's the framework, what's the foundation to starting, a business, to be an entrepreneur. And I think one of the, foundations for sure is never putting too much stress on the performance of the business, or especially early on. And so like one of the easiest ways to do that is by having a full-time job and doing, and letting the business kind of grow at its own pace without the pressure of supporting you too early. So,
well, and something I feel really fortunate about is that neither of us had like the option of being like a Nepo entrepreneur. We had to do it in a really organic way because we didn't have capital. And I don't know if you could do that now. I don't know if we live in that world because we relied on organic digital reach and blogs and things that just don't exist anymore. And we would have never been able to pay the Zuck bucks, as I call them, to reach people at that time. And so, which is sad. It's like sad to, it's interesting what people who are starting something new now go through. And I feel how different it is from what we did. And it's painful for me just because of the sharp turn of that. And I think it would be really hard to do that. But we were, by circumstance, we were taking the slow route. And also my point of privilege was that I got to call my old boss. I had been a jewelry buyer for Urban Outfitters previously. And I called my old boss and I just said, hey, I am making something now. I'm making jewelry and it's got a great story. And at that time, they were really into collaborations and they really wanted to be cool and find new things. And so they said, hey, come to Philly and show us. And in the first month we were in business, we had an order for 4,000 cuffs.
Oh my gosh.
And oopsie. And another like 5,000
Did you price those right?
Absolutely not. I still don't price things right. But the reality was then we had 4,000 cuffs to make and like another, 5,000 necklaces. And I didn't know how to make anything. And our shop was in Michael's dad's basement in like 100 square feet, and we had no materials, but we had an order.
Yep.
And we spent all of our time working on that order. And at the end of that year, at the holiday season, we got $100,000 check from, Urban Outfitters.
How much did you spend on that order, do you think? Not including time.
Yeah, time out, not much, because we made everything out of brass.
Okay,
and
so
honestly,
how many hours then do you think you put into that
however order? Many hours are in a day from June 1st to October 20th, because when I tell you there was not much sleep, there was not, from getting that order to shipping it, that was kind of all we did. In addition to, we had launched a website, so we had, some pathetic web sales or whatever. But we just knew there was going to be so much visibility. And it was such a hyper-specific skill that I was learning, and I was taking on points of the process and sanding and polishing and cutting and measuring. But there was so much of it that really only he could do, and there wasn't time to and we didn't have money. We hadn't gotten paid yet. We couldn't pay someone to help. So
how were you floating it at that point? I mean, you said
I was
you didn't
working. It was me.
So the money you were making, you were putting, which again, let's remember, like, this is a how long relationship? Like 2-month relationship at this point?
Oh, yeah.
So we have a 2-month relationship, and your work is financing a joint venture that you do with Michael, who you met on Tinder 2 months previously. Yeah. That is an incredible success story.
I tell people all the time not to do that. And
just because I crash landed a plane doesn't mean that you should try to crash land a plane.
We're not all Sullys, you know what I mean? But I think I love that. My personality is so well suited to that. I can't tell you how my trauma has translated into being super risk forward, but I was having the best time. And I also love to connect with people with a shared venture. Like, a shared goal is so powerful to me. And I also love doing, again, a wound. I love doing the thing I'm told I can't do. And also, Michael was a person that I'd never met anyone like him before, and I still have never met anyone like him before. He is the most purely self-initiating and sort of like innately motivated towards something that he cares about in a way that is relentless. Like, he is not easily distracted, especially impressive in this world. He's so focused, and he's quietly passionate, and he's just he loves this. He loves this craft and this shop so much that this is where he also spends his free time. And it's just always been that way. And so he was really easy to trust with it. Like, I had no fear that I was making a bad investment. And things have been up and down and hard. And him and I think this is a testament to this. We are not romantically partnered anymore. And we are still, domestically through our family and also through this business, especially, stronger and more reliant partners than we've ever been.
Amazing.
And so, I have never trusted someone more. And it was so immediate, that it's always been easy to sort of look to him and say, like, I think we should jump. And he's also such a careful person. And so there's this push and pull there that has served us really well in small business. The only thing that we both share, like, too much of an impulsive inclination towards is bringing dogs into our house. Neither of us will say no to that, and that has become a problem. But when it comes to business, like, he is cautious and I am, let's jump, and we pull each other in opposite directions, and we usually land somewhere interesting, at least.
So let's go back to the early stages of Studebaker. You do this big order for Urban Outfitters. You get $100,000, which allows you to kind of leave your marketing job, allows you to kind of move out of Michael's parents' basement with the business and hire an apprentice or someone who kind of works in a production help. What is, at this point, you're going, obviously, what many people don't know, I feel, is how these big opportunities with large box retailers like Urban Outfitters or, Urban Outfitters, American Eagle, all these businesses, they look great, but, they're actually a lot of work. There's a small margin. And
they don't reorder.
They don't reorder. So it's a really unhealthy way to predict your financials year after year, because
Means
it's like a
almost
one and
nothing.
done. Because it's like, oh, $100,000, wonderful. Well, that's not, how am I going to replace that next year? So you all are going into your first real year, coming off this really great success. You can't predict another $100,000 order. What are you learning? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, what are you learning in those first couple of years? Like, what are the lessons, and how do you create sustainability?
Well, I think a really fortunate thing for me was that I came from that world. And so when we got that order, I know exactly, I was the buyer of that category, and I knew that the next season I'd be chasing something different. And it was never about, partnering with a brand. But we also did get fortunate that it did do really well, and we had a longer life cycle. We had like a 3-season life cycle with them, which was
really good.
Sustaining and amazing. And we were really fortunate. But I also had like a unique insight. It was the necklaces that did well, and I quite literally knew what our customer was buying. So
you're perfect for it.
Yeah. And the other thing that did come with that was lots of exposure. And at the time, blogs were really big, and we were able to, our experience with that order led us to be featured in quite a few places. And that is how in our first year of business, we partnered with a Japanese distributor, and we are still partnered with them to this day. And that is, and was especially then, so massive. So
and for the listener that isn't familiar with like the men's like fashion market, like Japan, a certain segment of Japan is very, very interested in like American-made heritage, Americana style brands. And, so to get in with a good distributor or a good store, it could be massive, because there's such a thirst for it within the Japanese market, and the value that you can charge in Japan is just different.
Yeah. And the number one thing that sort of my peers, especially people I would meet at trade shows, would say is like, hey, how do I do that? How do I get in? And I have to just say, like, they had to find me, and I was lucky. And I do think I did this little dance with them, not on purpose. I wasn't like brilliant in the space or anything, but I said no like 3 times because they wanted exclusivity. And I just didn't feel, and I didn't feel comfortable with that, because I knew that it was a good market and I didn't know them. And they kept following and trying to build trust and making better terms. And they ended up being, and to this day are, truly incredible partners. But we were to have that in our first year of business with no capital and really no business having it, was such a lucky break. And, whatever spirit is, I always say, whatever angels are over Michael, because I definitely don't have any, have really like buoyed so many things, because so many things along the way feel
like without them,
divine.
We don't make it.
Yeah, they feel divine.
We have that every year.
Yeah.
And going back to what I was talking about before, is like, hey, you get this big opportunity and then you don't get it next year.
Yeah.
You're always, what part of, to talk about my work just for a second, like that has been what I've been trying to correct lately, which is like we have been so fortunate that year after year, we've had some sort of like saving grace partnership or opportunity or sale or special projects. Might be Dropbox one year, or doing gifts for Cash App, or working with American Eagle, or whatever it is. But like, you look at that happening year over year, and you're like, hey, if that thing doesn't happen this year, like we are in the red, like bad.
Yes.
And so part of what I've been trying to correct within miscellaneous goods is like how do we make those like cherry on top opportunities instead of like lifeblood opportunities?
I think that this could be like really sort of self-celebratory or something, but I believe it's something that I identify with your brand as well. Is I think that the reason those things happen, and the reason I believe they will continue to happen, is because the through line is that we stay really close to what we believe in and what we want and how we want to do it. And we do things and operate in a way that feels valuable to us. And I just think that there is a magnetism that comes to that, and that people, even big companies, want to participate in that. And so I do think that it's not necessarily all luck. I think there is a draw, and not that's what you were saying, but I do think that when you make good stuff and you keep your focus on why you're doing it, people want to be a part of that. And it is sort of rare. And so I think that I do kind of count on the magic because I believe that we're a little magical. But yeah, to some degree, it's like, for me, it's always trying to figure out the path forward that doesn't quite literally shackle me to digital advertising or Meta or the things that don't align with my values. And it becomes increasingly not just hard, but seemingly impossible to operate around. And I have lots of like silly things I always say. Like my biggest business bit is that I'm going to take the $50,000 I give to Mark Zuckerberg every month, and I'm going to get the billboards in every small town, and that's going to be my new marketing, and I'm just going to put something weird on them so they have to look me up. And I hope that one day I'm brave enough to do that because I do think it would work. But it's sort of a bit I do, which is like, how do I exist without waiting for magic and without just constantly playing the losing slot machine that is digital advertising? Because every time you get level there, they make it harder. And there's nothing that I hate more.
I 100% agree. And I'm actually going to take a second to explain to the listener who may not be familiar with it. Is that basically you have Google and Meta and Instagram primarily that have built up these really great, tools. And at first, a lot of us, small business owners would use these tools to create attention around our brands, and that would drive traffic and that would drive sales. Well, over the last, several years, both those companies, but we can just focus on Meta, have really figured out a way to kind of crush organic traffic to the small business or any business and make them overly reliant on sponsored content. So basically, in order to kind of get the same amount of attention that you would have gotten naturally 5 years ago, now you have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars a month just to gain that same sort of attention. And so it becomes a way less authentic expression of the brand. And I'm with you, Alyssa. I hate it. I mean, I fucking hate it. And it's like they're printing money over there. It's like the amount that we spend on the amount of work that they have to do. It's just like, it's so disproportionate.
I'm so happy. Yeah, I'm so happy to pay to play. I understand how the world works. I'm not asking. Yeah. I know they've developed exorbitant, this thing, but to be backed into that corner and you have to pay all that money and it doesn't even work. And they keep you chasing that. And I
will say it works for us. And it's
it's the only thing that works for us, right? So it works, but
become important. Right, exactly. Yeah. It's become important to the way that we do things.
But it's not, it's never certain, and you're constantly having to up it.
Yeah, you spend $2,000 on an idea and it doesn't develop or it doesn't produce a single dollar in return. There's no there's no apology letter from Meta saying, sorry, our service didn't work for you. Like it's on you. Like,
and also just you're forced to participate in something. And that is the oversaturation of,
oh my God, I'm just seeing
people's attention,
Dude, let's go back to the beginning of our conversation with your parents. I mean, do you see a relation between, Monsanto and the farming dilemma that they had, in the 80s to the current digital strategy limitations?
The Monsanto to Facebook pipeline is, it's absolutely, I feel controlled by something that doesn't align with my personal values. And that is a really difficult thing. And so you try to remember that you are also creating and presenting an inherently more responsible product, and you're giving people something that is of true value and that you believe in and that supports jobs and all of those things. And you tell
I've thought
that
about
story
that before.
but
you're playing that game too. And by playing the game, though, you're taking, in a good way, some of the attention away from a brand that maybe has bad ethics or has what you're going to do with that return, you know what I mean? Which is the best you can do with it.
Yeah.
Have you all been growing year over year? Have you stayed about the same? What's kind of share with me, what's the trajectory been? Where do you find the sustainability?
Yeah. In the early days, we had this because I think working in that industry was really useful because I knew right after we built our site and then had those couple of big one-time orders that we needed to diversify our revenue streams. And so that's when we started. And I had experience going to trade shows as a buyer. So I knew first thing we were going to hit wholesale. We had our direct to customer set up. Now we need to reach those boutiques across the country. And then at the same time, we had some private label opportunities come up, and I thought, okay, this is great. And then when we got our next shop, which was only a year after getting our first shop, it was really important to me to have in-person retail, and particularly that looked into our space and told the story. Because I have always from day one, which is why this all started, believed that our best-selling product was our process. And so the diversifying of our revenue streams and having lots of avenues to pull in orders, frankly, was really important and allowed us, as we added new channels, allowed us to see really big growth. Like our early year-over-year growth was 30%, 40%. Wow. And that's easy, right? When first of all, everything's organic and you're a new thing in both the space you're selling in and also in your community. And then you're starting at nothing, especially starting from nothing. It was just so easy to feel those wins, and there were lower expenses. So all of that happened. And I think that around year 8 I think we're at 11 years, maybe 12. There's a certain point where you stop counting. Because you realize that you're old. But the year 8 was when I started to feel like I was up against larger forces, and I really felt like pressure to grow, and there was growth inherently happening, and then your expenses go up. And I think that the way that we sustain through that is, number one, by radical acceptance that you're not going to be up all the time. Which I think is hard. I think that's hard when you did it for a while on a cash basis. And then suddenly you're taking on debt service, and you just have to get comfortable with things that are inherently uncomfortable and then keep going. And I say this when
you're less
people
moment to moment, and you're more you have a vision, a plan. That's
you have a vision and a day where you are wondering if you're going to make payroll is impossible feeling. And then you do, and then you keep moving forward. And you really, at a certain point, your choices are really simple. It seems complicated, but it's I can keep moving forward today or I can stop. And I think we feel that more acutely than ever right now because we're in a really specific space, and our material costs are, outrageous. Sterling and gold are not just all-time highs, they're comical. They are unbelievable. And a really big part of our market is the wedding ring space, and our gold customer and a sterling silver customer. And we do have a separate market for those base metals we use that are also up in cost, but more manageable. But we've had to make some really big decisions around that, keeping certain materials sold out, or we recently introduced stainless because which is another toolkit basically, but we needed an option for a white metal that wasn't sterling because it just has become untenable for so many people. And so we're up against that stuff. Space costs more, media costs more, our healthcare costs for our employees, like being a responsible employer, it feels like it's constantly mounting. But I think that the only way through that is to keep iterating. And I'm actually always surprised by how much reinvention I'm doing all the time at over 10 years in. And I think people look at us. I do think that we are easy to look at and say, oh, they're so comfortable and successful and they've got this cool thing. And we're in an old steel mill in the center of the city. And we have all these great tools and we have such a cool team. But it is that, it's less, it feels less glamorous than it ever has, but there is, at the end of the day, I don't have a boss, and that's good because I'm pretty unmanageable.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we deal with the same experience, which most of the time is like a compliment, which is people just really respecting what we do or what we make and what we've built, and they see it in a really idyllic way. And I think the best way to talk about it with them when I have a chance, when someone maybe over romanticizes what I do is it's very much like, if you've never had a child, it's really hard to explain, what being a parent is. It's really hard to explain how, yes, it's beautiful and really amazing to run a business, but also how challenging it is and how stressful it is. And so I never really get too in the weeds with them, just because it's the same way of like, how do you explain what it's like having month after month of sleepless nights because you have a kid? Like, it's the same with the business. How do you explain waking up at 3 a.m. and your mind is just racing, like with your debt or with your problem, or with being, like an inventory issue, but just like having kids, like there is a beautiful side to it that is impossible to access without being entrepreneurial.
Yeah. And you learn,
oh my gosh,
you learn about your own capacity in ways that you otherwise couldn't. And you create community that otherwise wouldn't exist. And there's so much about it, but it is pretty over romanticized often. And I also think people assume that like I have money, which is always the funniest part.
Wait until they see what you drive, it's just like,
and I'm like, oh no. Yeah. I've got bad news.
I spend a lot of money.
Spend a lot of money. I will say that like for what I do, a surprising amount of money comes into my account. It's just a matter of hours that it exists there. And I always say, like, I am very much funding a life and not necessarily under some guise that I'm building some sort of empire for my family.
Right. Do you think about like retirement at all now? Like I'm getting to the age, I turned 42 this year. So I'm getting to the age where, we don't have, my wife and I, we don't have anything really in our savings, and we have 5 kids. So we got to start thinking about their future. And then I want to also think about, so I'm in retirement thinking age. Is that even on your radar right now?
Totally. And so first of all, I want to thank you for your bravery in saying the like mid-sized business owner truth, which is that savings is not, that does not exist.
Yeah.
And I have a retirement account that I've been paying into since I was young, but it's nothing spectacular. But I do think about that, and I think about it even in terms of I'm a month and a half shy of my 40th birthday, so it's huge. Like everything is
the 40s are awesome, by the way.
Needlessly heavy. Yeah, thank you.
They're amazing. I love them.
Yeah, I've never felt stronger or more capable, confident, or hotter. So I'm not worried. Yeah, I'm not worried about it. I'm excited for it. I know it's just going to get weirder in the ways that are really generative to me, but I think often about, there's no getting around. The name on this building is Studebaker and our business, and that's not my name. And it's not that I don't feel like this is equally mine, but to some degree, we have been collaborating on like a heritage and a dream that is very much Michael's. And I think about my retirement from this even more acutely than my retirement in general, and sort of have been thinking about like, I don't think I'll ever be able to like part from the business, but my day-to-day being set up differently. And I have so many other interests and ways that I could think about spending my time professionally. And so I think about that stuff all the time, every day. And I mean, that's like the escapism, right? And then, and then when it comes to retirement, I mean, I was raised by parents who are well into their 70s, and right now they are harvesting a field, and they will do that until someone finds them dead in the field. So I never really had a great model for that. But I do think about like, oh shit, I hope that I can like cash out of this in some way. And that is a motivation to keep building, is like, oh, how do I either pass this to my children, or how do I at least come out comfortable? And I don't know the answer to that.
So when I told you like we have nothing in the savings, which we don't, I mean, the thing that I had been relying on, like the way that I would maybe process that, in previous years is like, but no, I'm building a business, and my goal is that would be my retirement plan, is that. And then that got shifted quite a bit last year when I actually thought about selling and like just giving it up. And what if I had the good fortune of selling, it would have just really taken care of our debt and maybe given me 6 months to find out what's next. And that was definitely around the time where I was like, okay, like maybe I shouldn't put all my eggs in the basket that, this business will continue to grow and someone will find value in it. In a perfect world, I keep the business for my whole life and I pass it down to my kids and they find creative ways to keep it going. I think that's not like...
They renew it in all kinds of special ways for the new world.
Right.
Yeah. How does your business fit into end times?
All right. Well, it depends on if 3i Atlas, if they really like fragrance or not.
But, Michael would love that reference. I've been trying so hard not to hear about it every day. But these are great questions. But and I think what you're saying, my like first impulse, like my response to what you were saying about how it shifted when you sort of had the chance to sell is like, what a remarkable amount of like faith and self and belief in what you're doing you need to have to consider your business your retirement plan. I mean, I think it's a really brave thing, but I think more importantly, it is something that can only be born through self-belief, self-love, confidence,
naivety.
And like being a dumbass. So
there's a couple of things that I'll say. Like I tell my kids this, like the least interesting people in the room are the people that haven't taken risks and haven't had challenges, like,
and haven't had to.
And haven't had to. And the ironic thing is, like, we end up trying to remove those from our own children, right? Like I was talking about earlier, is like make their life easier. But the truth is, like, the challenging things is what really shapes us. And so I am so thankful for it, because I do think I have a lot of experience and perspective that would only be shaped by the hardships. I hope it doesn't I hope I do find some real footing. And I hope, I'm sure you could say the same, to where it's not so of a grind. But regardless, I mean, we get what we get, and I'm super thankful for all of it. And we just have to think about normal things a little bit more now. We can't be just that wildly optimistic 20-year-old or 30-year-old. Like, now we have to think about it more like, okay, like, what is really possible for my future?
Do you feel like you have a unique predisposition for challenge?
Oh,
do you think that
100%.
That's part of it for you? Because that's something I think about. People often are like, how are you doing that? And I say, if it's not this, it's something else. I am perpetually running towards the thing.
To chaos.
I have no business doing.
Yes, I love chaos.
I've done that personally since starting my business. It's like, it's never really enough for me. And so I do think that is something I find as like a through line with people.
I completely agree. I mean, I feel if I don't feel uncomfortable, then I feel like I'm not doing enough, or there's, like that I'm wasting time. And so I always like to be doing something like starting a podcast when I'm running a business that's trying to, just get through the year. And, I just love the challenge. I love
challenge and novelty where those meet is such a satiating place.
Yeah.
I became a firefighter at 36.
Oh my gosh.
With 2 really young children. And then at 38, I joined a rugby club and started playing rugby. And that's generally 5 years after people retire.
Yeah.
And
that is not a young person's game.
I feel like every year I'm like, what am I going to do to feel uncomfortable?
Mm.
And I, that's a thing to explore in therapy more than anywhere, but it definitely is telling of why this has worked.
Well, listen, I'm so glad you took the time to talk with me, because I've respected you from afar from a long time, and it doesn't take much. It takes a short conversation or email with you to realize, one, how much you care about what you do, two, how much you care about other people, because the energy and time you give to other people's questions and thoughts, and that you've done for me in years past. So I've always had that respect for you, but to hear so much about your early years and the way that you met Michael, and the way that the two of you all kind of built this thing and kind of kept it going year over year, I'm just so glad to hear it, because I think it's just such an inspiring story. And thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it, and wish you and Studebaker Metals the best.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. And yeah, you've always been a sort of special connection in this world for us as well. And specifically in the ways that we met, there was just lots of quick intimacy and conversation and bonding around this kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't always say yes to podcasts.
Oh, well, thank you.
With boys.
Cool.
But I was excited for it. And yeah, I appreciate it. It was a good talk.
That's the end of our conversation. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, one small way that you can support both the podcast and our team at Miscellaneous Goods Company is to follow the show or pass the episode along to someone new. The music throughout the show comes from my friend, co-worker, and musician, Woods at Night. This episode was edited by TJ Hester. Like everything else here, it's a small group of people doing careful work. I'm Tyler Deeb, and this is The Infinite Errand.